I am calling the January 20th meeting of the Public Safety and Human Services Committee of the Whole to order. In attendance are Council President Stewart, Council Vice President Nueva Camina, Council Member Forsyth, Council Member Kritzer, Council Member Soni, and myself, Presiding Officer, Council Member Prakria. We have 4 action items on the agenda. The first action item is the approval of the 2026 Public Safety and Human Services Committee of the Whole Work Plan, and the presenter for this item is myself. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen for Teams. And I'm going to go ahead and give an overview quarter by quarter. So we have 3 departments here: police, fire, and planning. For the first quarter, January, February, and March. From police, we have continuing the vendor selection for parking enforcement, which in the meantime we have Diamond Parking, the contract renewal for Diamond Parking as we bridge the gap to our new vendor for this parking enforcement. For new ordinances, we also have a couple of updates with regards to parking enforcement. For fire, we have our quarterly Office of Emergency Management report. We have our quarterly overtime report, as well as our quarterly fire loss versus what we have saved report. We have permits and impact fees, and a small donation of $1,000. We have a couple of grants that we may end up receiving. So we have a grant from FEMA, we have a grant from EMPG, as well as updates to the fire operational permits and new fire impact fees. And with regards to planning, I believe a little bit of a lighter quarter, we have an update on housing framework, rapid response fund allocation, and public defense grant evaluation. As well, we have an ordinance for the donation of $1,000 from fire. For quarter 2, April, May, and June, going again in the same order of police, fire, and planning. With regards to police, we have our quarterly report of police activity, as well as a report on police technology. We have our 2025 annual report, as well as a tentative set of new ordinances we may have to establish in Redmond for HB 1515, which is a bill in the state legislature right now establishing libation zones for the World Cup. So zones that you can, that are open to public consumption of alcohol. We may have to amend some of our ordinances in accordance with that state law that is, that may pass. With regards to fire, we again have our quarterly Office of Emergency Management report, our quarterly overtime report, fire loss and save, as well as the annual report. We have a tentative junior fire chief ceremony, as well as 3 new contracts and agreements, one with EMAC Wildland, one with the Department of Natural Resources Wildland contract, and as well with the Department of Ecology grant acceptance in preparation for a potential second electric fire engine for the city of Redmond. With regards to planning, we have updates on our next budget's human services funding process from planning staff, as well as more updates on housing framework in accordance with Redmond 2050. Going on to quarter 3, we have, for police, we have updates. We have our quarter 2 police activity report, as well as another report on police technology, as in last quarter. We have 3 new contracts. So the LWSD Community Resource Officer contract, our contract with King County Jails, and our FFIT grant renewal contract, which delves into financial crime. With regards to fire, we have Again, our quarterly Office of Emergency Management report, overtime report, fire loss and save, as well as our contract with our interlocal agreement with Fire District 34 is also going to be discussed. With regards to planning, we have a joint study session coming up in Q3 in preparation for our Housing and Human Services Strategic Plan, and also the Community Block Development Grant. We're going to get a briefing on that. For Q4, again, more of the standard items for each quarter. So our Q3 police activity report, another report on police technology, as well as contracts with jails. For fire, we have our quarterly Office of Emergency Management report, overtime report, fire loss versus save, as well as our our EMS end of year report is coming out. And as Chief Shepard has told me, we have a world-class EMS system here in Redmond, so I'm very much looking forward to that. Finally, with planning, we have updates on health through housing, as well as the 27 through 28 funding recommendations for human services are going to be presented to us. Are there any questions? Councilmember Forsyth.
Thank you. Just two things that I'd like to flag to add to the work plan. In Q4, when we're talking about the SCORE jail, we had last year sought to see if Kirkland would be open to receiving some of our folks that need that holding. So I want to make sure we don't just look at SCORE, that we actually add Kirkland to this. I know they weren't ready last year, but maybe they'll be ready this year. So I want to make sure we add that. And then in September, I want to make sure we flag our ALPR contract with Flock and that renewal, so we don't miss that opportunity to decide what we're doing there.
Wonderful. Councilmember Kritzer.
Yeah, thank you so much for working on this, and to the directors and chiefs for working on this as well. So a couple of things. One is, I think I don't see on here check-ins on the Thrive program and alternative crisis response. We typically have asked for that to be at least a quarterly check-in, so that way we can hear how that's progressing. And I think some of the past conversations, especially as we're scaling up some of our alternative crisis response, I think it'd be great to have that as an item for us to check in on, both from police, but also it'd be great to be able to hear from the other parts of the Thrive program that I think cuts basically across this committee, unless it's, I don't know if it's showing up in Planning and Public Works, so my guess would be this is the right committee for that. So would love to see that throughout as items that show up quarterly in here, and hopefully to get an update in the sooner part of the year. I know we just brought on a new co-responder, and so it'd be great to be able to hear some of the results of how that's going, and also from Tiza and her team. And then the other thing that I think we have only in Q4 is an update on permanent supportive housing and health through housing. I think it would be great. I think we had committed to doing quarterly updates to be able to hear more about how that's going, and any updates on the Plymouth project as well. So would be great to be able to see that in this committee. And then I just wanted to also clarify, because I think we discussed this at a previous one, but that this committee used to host the READY work, but I will plan to put it in the FAC committee as discussed at a previous committee meeting. I don't see it in this work plan, and I assume that's because it's going to go into FAC. Is that correct?
I believe that is the case. I will follow up with you on that, and with everything else that you said, I see nods from around the table. So I will work with staff to put this, this is going into the consent agenda, I believe, for the February 3rd meeting. So work to put the updates from you and Councilmember Forsyth as well into the consent agenda. Council President Stewart.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing this forward. And yes, the idea is that by the end of February, we can hopefully have all of them across the finish line. I certainly agree with the flags from Councilmember Kritzer. And one other addition we should consider checking in on is the Alternative Crisis Response Subcommittee. My understanding had been waiting to evaluate the performance of our partner over at Sound before making a recommendation or evaluating further some of the FTEs that are actually in the current budget. So probably this work plan needs a point in time where we can hear from the Alternative Crisis Response Subcommittee. So we maybe we'll need to hear from them about when that point in time might be, but probably Q2 or 3 is appropriate. Thanks.
Council Vice President Nueva Camino.
Thank you. I know that we had mentioned the grant for taking a look at bringing on a second electric engine, fire engine. So I know that we also need an update for the charger as well, and where that is going to sit, where just kind of where that is right now in process. So we just need that updated.
Perfect. And I will try then to get that added in Q1 or Q2 before the update on the second fire engine, the grant for the second fire engine. Councilmember Kritzer?
I have one more question, but I also see that Chief Lowe has his hand up, so I pointed in case he had a follow-up on one of these.
Oh, yes, Chief Lowe. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. For the flock, I would ask that we not calendar that for September. There's some additional conversation that needs to be had around effective dates of the contract that we will have in subsequent deliberations with council, and then we can make adjustments to the work plan accordingly.
Councilmember Kritzer?
Great, thank you. My other question was, it may fall under the police technology update that's in Q2, but I would love to get an update since we haven't seen yet the implementation of the school speed zone cameras, and I would like to hear an update on timeline, implementation, et cetera on that.
Wonderful. And everyone, I will add that as well, or I'll work to get that added as well. Council President Stewart.
Well, thank you, Chair Pagria, for being the first to bring this through and also on one of your very first committee meeting. I think what you can do next is plan to take the feedback, work with the directors. I think some of the questions that were brought up, for instance, the speed school zone cameras may actually already be scheduled as part of a study session we have coming up on police technology. So those are the kinds of things you can sort out with your directors. And then I think after you get direction here to advance this to the consent agenda, this is of course just a guiding document, and I really appreciate everyone digging in on making sure that we have as comprehensive as a list, but this is just a tool and does not have to be the final answer. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you all for your questions. If there are none other, then I will, Council Vice President Nueva Camino.
Thank you, and thank you. My laptop, my city laptop is having some issues and not booting up, so I don't have my notes in front of me. One of the things that I had thought about was some of the concern about, we've got light rail that's going to be opening up, hopefully by the end of May, though that date is flexible. Taking a look at if there has been any impact towards the end of the year, and I'm sure that Chief Lowe and Chief Shepard have already been thinking about this and preparing. When would we be able to get some kind of feedback as far as if there has been any impact to public safety?
Chief Lowe or Chief Shepard, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, so as far as impacts, as I've talked about that from a public safety perspective, once the rail becomes operational and it comes into Redmond, at that point, we'll be able to start gathering data. However, we won't be able to get the true impact after, like, say, that first year because we're measuring against zero. So it's going to take some time, but we will be tracking that particular impact. As a matter of fact, we've already set up a transit zone to be able to capture the calls for service in and around the rail stations. So immediately upon a call for service coming in that defined area, we will have, I'll say, stats or statistics, but the true impact, it'll take us some time, to know what that is.
Right, and also understanding that this first year would be potentially skewed because we've also got World Cup happening as well.
Correct.
Thank you, Chief.
Are there any other questions on this action item? Perfect. If not, then I'm going to move on to the second action item, which is the Diamond Parking 6-month contract extension discussed in the previous section a little bit. And I will call on Chief Lowe to present on this item.
Thank you. What you have before you is that we're requesting staff to authorize to approve a 6-month extension with Diamond, who is our current parking enforcement contractor. What we realized was that the contract that we had in place expired at the end of last year. We no longer had automatic renewals. As you know, the parking enforcement has been moved internal, coming to the police department. We do not have the vendor selected for that yet, nor do we have the staffing. So we need the 6-month extension in order for us to do the RFP process and to select a vendor to get us through the remainder of 2026. And then we will be staffed and able to handle that internally as of 2027. And that's it. So if there's questions or comments.
Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Are there any objections to this item going on the consent agenda for the February 3rd business meeting? Wonderful. In that case, we will move on to the third action item, which is the King County Independent Force Investigations Team interlocal agreement modification. And we will have, again, Chief Lowe presenting on this item.
Thank you. What you have before you is a modification to the existing ILA for the Independent Force Investigation Team. The reason for the modification is that the Seattle Police Department has come out of their consent decree, and then as part of King County and consistent with state law, they are now being brought into KC IFIT. So this, like I said, the modification of an existing agreement based on state law. It has already been approved by 3 other jurisdictions, so it technically is already in effect. The language in there states that once 2 of the parties to the agreement sign off on it, it essentially covers us all. So again, if there's any questions or comments.
Councilmember Kritzer.
So is the major change is the inclusion with Seattle?
Yes, that is the only change. As just Seattle is now included in the agreement.
Okay, but there's nothing else changed otherwise, because it's a little hard to tell the differences there. Okay.
Correct.
Great. Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments? Are there any objections to this item going on the consent agenda for the February 3rd, 2026 business meeting? Wonderful. In that case, we will be moving on to the 4th action item, which is the adoption of 3 resolutions related to provision of CM 26-022 affordable housing. And I have also been asked that we present on these items in one by one, A, B, and C. I believe also that Director Helland is testifying right now on a bill in Olympia, so she is not able to make it. But we have planning staff here with us, ready to report. So thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, City Council. My name is Seraphy Allen, and I'm the Deputy Director of Planning and Community Development. This item might win longest title and is a collection of 3 resolutions as related to the provision of affordable housing and our working relationship with a regional coalition for housing, also known as ARCH. I will turn it over to Ian Lefcourt to brief you on each subsection of this item. Ian?
Thank you, Seraphy. Hello, Council. It's me, Ian Lefcourt, he, him pronouns, Principal Planner with Long Range Planning. We will go through each of the resolutions one by one, explain what they are, and then present them again as a cohesive whole for Council action. The first is a request to approve allocation of $1,217,000 to a regional coalition for housing, ARCH, for the development of affordable housing. This is part of our regular annual Housing Trust Fund process. As a reminder, all the ARCH member jurisdictions pool funds together and then solicit nonprofit development every year. A review panel of Community Advisory Board members reviews them, makes recommendation to the ARCH Executive Board. Those come up to member jurisdictions, and each individual council must approve the funding allocation, hence why the item is in front of you today. The 2025 funding round supports 7 housing projects, totaling the creation or rehabilitation of 504 affordable units. And the Redmond impact specifically is one project where 20 units of permanent supportive housing for families experiencing homelessness or at high risk of homelessness will be served. And the funds will help ensure the long-term preservation of the property and the necessary repairs. So that's the first item. The second resolution is approving key changes to the down payment program in ARCH. This program has existed for a while and it's been historically successful. The changes in front of you are mainly for 2 reasons. One, to streamline the administrative process, create clarity, make the process more efficient. The second is to expand the efficacy of the dollars and expand the number of households that could qualify. The reason for these changes is simply that it's getting more and more expensive in our region. The initial max limit, for example, of the down payment assistance was $30,000. That doesn't move the needle much for a house in East King County. So they've increased that. That's just one example of the changes. There are more that were included in your council packet. Importantly, there are no additional funds directly requested of Redmond. It's just a change to the program itself. That was item 2. So the third resolution is the delegation of administrative duties to Bellevue for the ARCH Housing Trust Fund financing agreements that predate the 2010 interlocal agreement amendment. Approving this recommendation will grant the City of Bellevue and ARCH staff the authority to administer all of these existing agreements. Currently, the ones before 2010 are still being individually handled by all of the different organizations and member jurisdictions. It's leading to discrepancies in methodology and just creating entropy where none needs to exist. We can streamline the process. For all 3 resolutions, there are no anticipated challenges, and so in conclusion, we're requesting that Council adopt these items via consent agenda at the February 3rd business meeting.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Council Vice President Nueva Camino.
Thank you. Always wonderful to see you here. Thanks for joining us. And Ian, thank you for breaking down, even though this is our annual 1.2 that we do, thank you for breaking it down so that both new council members as well as listening public can keep up with why this is going where it's going. And also thank you for this, making it easier for folks to stay housed or get housing, whether that is with our home ownership, because we hear a lot from our community around, it's one thing to get housing, but to increase the probability of or possibility of being able to purchase a home is really where one of the areas that we can focus on. So this is great. Thanks.
Council President Stewart.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the materials and the information tonight and fully support this package moving forward on February 3rd. Whenever we get the list, as it were, of the projects that are going to be receiving investments from the Housing Trust Fund, I'm sure many of my colleagues can identify with this. We first look to see, is there one in our city? Are we going to be lucky enough to get one of the investments? And I'm pausing just to flag that we are, in fact, the city of Redmond will benefit immediately from the investments here. The permanent supportive housing that already exists in Redmond for children and families is in fact slated for an investment here. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that particular project?
Absolutely. It's located downtown next to a bunch of great amenities. It is stewarded by YWCA. It focuses on our most vulnerable populations, and it includes on-site case management services and other resources. It really is a jewel of our permanent supportive housing crown.
Well, thank you so much. Really excited to be able to continue to make these investments. Thank you.
Any other questions? Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Seraphy and Ian, for your presentation, as well as thank you, Chief Lowe, for your presentations. We've reached the end of the action items. And next up is an informational session on Housing and Human Services Civic Education from Brooke Beckingham, who I worked with previously on the Human Services Commission. So it's great to see you again, Brooke.
So Brooke is actually not going to be presenting. Again, Deputy Director Allen, but thank you, Brooke, our Human Services Manager, for joining us. As a reminder, this is part 2 of 4 presentations back in, wow, it was only November. Feels like a lot of time has passed since then. We did an overarching presentation about what these next 3 presentations will look like. And so the council might remember, we talked about kind of the 3 pillars of housing. And so this presentation is really going to focus on building more housing faster. And so Ian, Brooke, and the team in planning have worked together to create a great presentation for you all, and we'll look forward to taking kind of questions at the end, but this is informational, and I'll turn it over to Ian to get us started.
Thank you, Seraphy. Hello again, council members. As Seraphy shared, as a reminder, this is the second of 4 parts in our series on housing stability, housing equity, and how the intersection of human services and housing comes together to support our community. Tonight, we're going to focus mainly on building more housing faster. We're talking about supply, underlying context. We want to educate council so that they know the main factors that are at play and eventually the main levers that you all can influence in city direction. And one of the key lessons tonight, it can seem simple, but it warrants emphasis. The city itself does not build housing. We set the stage for others to build homes through policies, staffing, systems, and direct resource investments. This is the graphic we developed in the first presentation, this framework that we're hoping to help scope conversations and projects. We have build more housing faster, getting people housed, and keeping people housed. At our previous presentation to council, we also discussed past, current, and future work in terms of housing and human services. One of the key takeaways of our previous meeting was a consensus approach on unifying our housing action plan and our human services strategic plan into one unified document going forward. It's likely these documents will get a light refresh just because most of the underlying context work can be informed by our Redmond 2050 comprehensive plan work. So what are we focusing on tonight? The green pillar, building more housing faster. One of the underlying factors that's most important to housing demand is, of course, population. If there's more people than there are housing, cost goes up. Vice versa, price goes down. Population is largely driven by employment. We are lucky that on the East King County, we have a robust local economy with plentiful jobs. This graph shows the overall trend between employment numbers going up, population going up, and housing trying to catch up as well. Specifically for our planning efforts, we're lucky that we have a clear benchmark. These are the King County countywide planning policies. They were adopted, as with the other King County comprehensive plan updates very recently, and in the green is our total target. That's how much estimated need there is. And the key takeaway for this slide is that 73% of net new housing needed is at 50% AMI or below. We'll talk about AMI, we'll talk about how we're tracking, but that's really the northern star of all of our work, is trying to provide housing units for those households. One important consideration is housing supply, as we discussed, and there are two factors that can regulate and constrain it. One, how much literal land exists. City of Redmond's not growing. We pretty much have what we had. So the other consideration is how much housing is allowed on any given piece of land. In Redmond 2050, we did a great effort of ensuring development capacity increased in our regulations. More housing units were allowed on more areas of land in terms of development capacity. The tagline of Redmond 2050 is suburb to city, and that was very evident in our land use, where much of the city had regulations such that you could have one dwelling unit for every quarter acre. Compare that to some of our more dense developments in downtown where you can have hundreds of dwelling units. Simply put, with all the folks who want to live on the East King County, we need to make sure that we increase capacity, and you all did. Redmond 2050 accomplished that development capacity, including a little bit of overage. So it's not just a literal development capacity, assuming what we would need to meet our targets, but some market analysis as well, saying, well, if conditions are a little worse here, maybe development won't occur, but it might over here. So we are likely set in terms of development capacity. Check on that one. And here's all the things that go into actually making development happen. Our smart and diligent private sector development partners have to do a lot of homework before they can figure out whether or not a development will be financially feasible. Prices of land, construction materials, lending rates, and more all impact the viability of development. So the main takeaway here is to note, when we make policy or regulatory changes, we consider all of these different aspects because all the people who are building housing consider them as well. This is the development process. Don't worry about all the details. Some of the high-level takeaways is that, again, it's a complex process with many different steps. Most notably, that green bar represents the actual timeline of construction. Development takes multiple years, but when we visit our community and see the building actually being built, that's just a small chunk of the overall timeline. This means that in our planning and community development commitment to monitor, evaluate, and iterate on our regulations and policies, it can take a while to see the actual impact of those changes. Area median income. This is a key term to understand. It's an industry standard metric to gauge affordability. AMI is the midpoint of a specific area's income distribution. Half the folks earn less, half earn more. The AMI value is published every year for different geographic regions by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Then ARCH staff takes that and calculates it based on different household sizes. So for example, if we had an affordable housing unit that was one bedroom, and so it would be leased out to a household of one person, that AMI is actually lower than what it would be if it was a four-person household. This way we ensure that it's calibrated for each unique unit and each unique household. The level of affordability for cost-controlled housing, again, industry standard, is usually expressed as a percentage of area median income. Example, 50% AMI, 70% AMI, 80% AMI, and so forth. And affordable housing has several different meanings. Often, and in our code, it is defined as affordable when a household pays no more than 30% of its income for that housing. This can include things like utilities, it can include things like HOAs. And importantly, this metric has different scalability in terms of housing stability. The higher income the household, the more resilience there is to being cost burdened, because you'll have so much money that your housing security, that specific house may be lost, or a housing unit, but you would have enough income flow to be able to have some resilience to it. We consider a household cost burdened when housing costs exceed 30% of the gross income, and severely cost burdened when it exceeds 50%. And that happens quite a bit in this community. And this is becoming more and more of an impact to our community, because over the last 10 years or so, incomes have gone up about 50%. Rents have gone up 66%. And home prices have gone up 160%. One of those is not like the other. And so it makes it very difficult, and hence emphasizes the need for things like our ARCH down payment assistance program to bridge that gap to get more home ownership. Because the AMI in our city is so high, many households and many professions earn less than 100% AMI. It's important to note that income depends less on how skilled an individual is at their job and more at the job they are in. You can be the best middle school math teacher in Washington State, and you're still not going to be making $400,000 a year. You're not going to be making $300,000 a year. So when we look at who this affordable housing is for, it's for our community. Without cost-controlled housing, we would exclude various professions and folks from our community. There are many housing strategies for different income levels. The city of Redmond is a champion for housing and implements and utilizes all of these at various stages, various partnerships, various opportunities. You'll note on the left, we have a column of different area median income cells with different numbers in them. When we get down to 50%, you'll see that the color is actually slashed between green and red, which means that some of this may be served by land use and tax incentives, such as our inclusionary zoning, our multifamily tax exemption, but some of it will also need direct assistance. And this speaks directly to your role as council, because funding is a part of your purview. But what is inclusionary zoning, you ask? It is on-site mixed income, cost-controlled housing units, integrated right into the development with the market rate units. Now, there are several policies in our comprehensive plan which emphasize the need for integrated equity, geographic housing equity. We want to make sure that folks aren't shunned off to one corner of our community. We want all different incomes mixed together. And our mandatory inclusionary zoning was updated through Redmond 2050 to, again, target those 50% AMI households, in concert with many of those development capacity increases we discussed as well. Importantly, our voluntary MFTE program was also recalibrated to align at 50% AMI units. So the mandatory inclusionary zoning means whenever development occurs in our city, we are going to get some affordable housing from it. That is terrific, and not every jurisdiction pursues that. In some cases, flexibility is needed. While the city policy favors on-site affordable units, sometimes we have alternative compliance. This is where, in lieu of those on-site affordable housing units, the applicant will provide cash contributions or some other type of alternative compliance, which could be building affordable housing units off-site, adjusting the on-site unit mix, a variety of flexible options. And the reason we have this is to provide flexibility in serving our customers. We want to make sure that instead of losing a potential opportunity, we would have some flexibility to address it. We are pragmatic, and we take an all tools in the toolbox approach. And those tools have worked. This data snapshot from early 2025 from Arch shows just how many affordable units and beds have been constructed. Proven tools and strategies. Donated land from Sound Transit going on at our Overlake Village Station transit-oriented development. Mandatory inclusionary zoning. Direct funding from the Housing Trust Fund and other situations. Partnerships. It all comes together to create this. A community that is far more equitable than it would be had these tools never been implemented. And we want to emphasize that Redmond has done a lot of good work. There is still a lot more work to do. And we can track how much progress we're making. If we recall back to that slide with the King County countywide planning policy metrics, we know that we need 24,800 housing units between 2019 and 2050, which comes out to about 800 a year. How are we doing? We are on track. We have developed more than 800 per year, but not on track for deeper affordability. Those units are not at the levels of affordability we need them to be, which is represented in the pie charts. But it's still worth celebrating. It's still worth celebrating the great work that we are doing to get housing done. And it's especially important to recognize because of all the jurisdictions and the King County unincorporated county, Redmond's growth represents 6.5% of all the planned growth. So what we do serves as a beacon to other jurisdictions, and it shows that it's possible. Things are getting built, housing is getting constructed. We are on track. And so finally, with council's role in housing supply, we're here to create the conditions conducive to housing production. One of the biggest is to zone for capacity to meet the need. Check. Thank you for Redmond 2050. We did it. Now we need to act on specific programmatic, funding, process improvement, and other actions from the Housing Action Plan and the Human Services Strategic Plan. Our revised unified plan is currently underway and will be updated with feedback from council. And we want to encourage the continued use of all strategies to support construction of affordable housing. And finally, to invest in staff, systems, and tools that improve permitting processes. That's really important because our city went from suburb to city real quick. We've often been referred to as going through our teenage years, and we have outgrown our clothes. We are growing very quickly, and we need to take some time to reflect on the customer service expectations we have, the overall development review capacity we have, and figure out the right size for us. And that's going to be part of your budgetary discussions later this year. That's a lot, all about housing. Some of the key lessons to take away is that we do not build housing, we set the stage for housing. We are doing a great job. It is unlikely that we will meet the overall estimated housing need because it is so many housing units at such a deep level of AMI, but we should do the best we can with what we have. All of these pieces come together. Thank you for your attention. We welcome questions.
Thank you so much, Ian, Seraphy, Brooke, and everyone else who worked on this presentation. Do we have any questions? Council Vice President Nueva Camino.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you for your presentation, and the information that you gave us was great. As you said, there's stuff in there to be celebrated, and there was just some hard facts that we're not going to hit what we need to at the level that we need to, or that it's highly unlikely that we will. But that nonetheless does not mean that we are going to be pushing forward. My question, and perhaps this is too far in the weeds for tonight, and I'm happy to continue it in a study session or wherever. One of the theories in housing that we know is the more housing period that we can open up, then the better off that we're going to be. However, the question that I've got is if we, and of course, along with inclusionary housing and all of the levers that we have, however, if as we're going through and thinking about a couple of downtown parcels that could be up for redevelopment, and I don't know if they are or not, but as an example, Just to be clear for the listening public, this is completely an example. If there was a parcel that was going to be redeveloped and say that it's currently senior housing and say that there's, I don't know, 25 units that are on there, and that's going to be demoed, redeveloped, and at-market housing is going to be going in, and say that it's 100 units, with inclusionary housing, then we're looking at 10, depending on when the zoning, maybe 12 units are going to be participating within the ARCH program. So now we've got 12, we'll err on the higher, we've got 12 units, but we just took 25 out. So instead of creating more in the theory that I was speaking of, at market, then that's going to create now an opportunity for somebody to up-level their current home, opening up affordable housing or a lower income housing need. But in this scenario, it doesn't do that because land is so scarce here. So do we have tools that we can use as council to kind of counter this? Because in theory, it's a wonderful theory, and I know in other parts of the country, it works beautifully. I just see some flaws with it for here in Redmond. And so how can we continue to promote and have that great customer service with our developing community while also providing the housing at the depth that we need it at?
That is a very salient question because displacement has been a central theme of discussions in housing across our county, especially for Redmond. Much displacement has already occurred. And so in 2024, we participated in a Department of Housing and Urban Development technical assistance grant with consultants who provided some analysis and some tentative recommendations on anti-displacement and replacement strategies. The hope is that that draft document will be integrated into our HAP/Human Services Strategic Plan to figure out tangible actions that we can then take from recommendations into council-approved programs, actions, regulations of that. So the short answer is stay tuned. We will continue to find opportunities for you to help the city help those folks who would be displaced.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kritzer.
I have a quick follow-up question on that, and then I had a different question. I was just curious, is there anything we could do to incentivize those who may have a property where they could do, say, retrofits on it or upgrades versus kind of like a full-scale redevelopment? That's going to be a part of that conversation?
Absolutely. There are already some examples of that elsewhere in the state. It was something we are looking forward to consider more in depth. Yes is the answer.
Great. And then, so my question was, I appreciated seeing the slide about ARCH housing and the comparative to different jurisdictions. Were those numbers ARCH-supported housing or total affordable units?
I believe those are exclusively ARCH.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it is exciting to see out of all the cities, and we're not the biggest city on that list, and yet we have the most affordable units, and that's maybe not even everything we've created through our inclusionary zoning. So I think that's very exciting. One question that comes up a lot in conversation around building housing faster is around permitting processes and improving kind of on the development pieces. And I know that we've been doing a process we've been doing a study to figure out process improvements. So I'm just curious in terms of timing, will you be coming back to council and just some things that we might expect there? Because I do think that seems like it's one of the places not only that's a discussion here at the local level, but also I think where we might find some good improvements here locally. We could also model that, since the state is always kind of looking at that, but to be able to say, hey, we can find these solutions here at the local level through looking at our own process improvement.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say, yes, that we did not add as much on the permitting end because there is going to be a focused session with council on the process improvement that's been happening with development services in Q2 or Q3 of later this year.
Councilmember Forsyth.
Thank you. Thank you for calling out the slide about the affordable housing. I was hoping we could bounce back to it real quick. It's like 3 or 4. There it is. Just for community to be able to see how much further ahead Redmond is in our affordable units. Like, we're nearly 1,000 units more than Bellevue, and that's pretty cool for us. Like, we are definitely looked at as a leader on this, so I just wanted to highlight that. Speaking to the process of permitting and all of that, there is currently a Senate bill, I'm blanking on the number, but through the housing trip that the mayor and Director Helland and I took to Arizona, those conversations led to the bill that is currently in the Senate right now. So stay tuned for that. I think that's what you mentioned that Carol is currently testifying on right now. So we'll hear about that soon, I hope. Just for me personally, I wanted to highlight, thank you for showing the mandatory inclusionary zoning and calling out that we are essentially breaking down redlining. And that was something I was concerned about 6-7 years ago. And it's really cool to see how it's playing out and making sure that we're not redlining people into certain communities and recreating issues of the past with a modern twist. So I really appreciate that call out. And then I also wanted to, for maybe a later session, the fee in lieu, this is something we've talked about a lot on council, and how many people actually take advantage of that. If I recall, it's a fairly low number, but I would love for us to have in a presentation in the future how many people are actually utilizing that fee in lieu instead of what we're hoping will happen. I just think that would be a good thing for us to have that conversation. And it's also really exciting to see that, I know a couple years back, we made the push for deeper affordability at that 50% level. We were really good on the 60 to 80% for a long time, and now it's really cool to see that we're covering that area and we're moving into those deeper levels of affordability. So just really cool to see how far this has come over the last several years. Thank you.
Council President Stewart.
Thank you so much for continuing the conversation with us tonight. And I know tonight's presentation is mostly informational and help us reset. I really appreciate your comments, Mr. Lefcourt, that the upcoming Housing and Human Services Strategic Plan refresh will be largely guided by Redmond 2050, because we did this thing with Redmond 2050 and we were bold. So I'm really looking forward to all of those bold policy directions being put in as next steps. For me, a couple of just highlights for the last two slides, especially for my newer colleagues. It is really significant. We continue to be on track, as we said, for overall supply, but the affordability and the deep affordability is, of course, a deep need of our community. So yes, the mountain is very, very steep, and our ability to achieve what we set on paper we could plan for is very difficult. I think that's our job to ask ourselves as a policy body what else we can be doing. A lot of tools were mentioned here tonight. I'm just going to offer one more that wasn't mentioned, which is direct investment. So a couple of years ago, the mayor and the council in our biennial budget set aside $10 million of one-time money, and we have been able over time to actually make direct investment in projects that might not otherwise have their funding stack put together. I have found that to be a powerful tool, and in discussions with neighboring jurisdictions who maybe haven't been in a position to set aside $10 million, because that's real, or haven't chose to do that, there's a lot of curiosity about how we did that. So just as we go into a budgeting year, I wanted to call out direct investment is one of the ways that we can help those last few units get funded, or those more deeply affordable units and family-sized units, and get at some of these things that we know are real deep needs. So all for more for the conversation this year. Thanks.
Mind if I jump in? I just want to say, too, that the $10 million was included actually in the ARCH packet, if you might have seen the accounting from there. So I just want to say thank you for calling that out.
Thank you, and I think Councilmember Soni has a question as well.
First of all, thank you so much for sharing this presentation. Definitely, it's very informational for the new council member. As going through this, so not a question on the presentation, but just curious to know, this is a second of 4. What was on the first? And for me, I'm also a bigger champion for keeping people housed, and I definitely see that is one of the pillars here, because sometimes if we are not able to sustain, then it definitely creates our impacts our number. So just curious to know, like, in terms of your series of these presentations, that there are two more to come, and are they going to cover that, and the plans and the strategies for that? I'm just curious to know about those.
Oh, you better believe that's coming. Because part of fighting displacement is exactly what you said, keeping folks in their home. So that will be coming up later, and that will skew more to the human services side of the component. And the first presentation really was about setting up this framework, giving an update on the work we've done so far. I can go ahead and forward those materials to you. Terrific.
Wonderful, and I know we're running short on time, so feel free to keep your answer extremely brief, but I did have one question as well. On the stat about the Redmond accounting for 6.5% of the county's new housing. And, Redmond makes up about 3.5% of the county's population, so that seems really good. We're almost double the average rate of the county. But I was wondering, only about 3% of new population growth since 2019 has come from rural areas of the county. How much higher than average are we when we compare ourselves to, the urban parts of King County? Do you have a rough estimate?
In terms of the proportion of housing going to a jurisdiction relative to the amount of housing they already had, Redmond is very near the top of the list. For specific numbers, I'd have to do further analysis.
Wonderful. And then one other quick follow-up, which is, and I am by no means an expert on housing production, but is we say that we're on track to meet at least our number, 24,800, by looking at the fact that we're over 800 units a year in production right now. But I'm wondering, what does that curve generally look like for housing production? Because, you mentioned right at the beginning, the big constraints like space. It seems to me that perhaps it would get harder and harder to build housing production as we go further on. So even though we're above 800 right now, that's not necessarily going to be the case in a few years. What are we accounting for with regards to that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because as we recall, this starts in 2019. So we obviously had a few dips there because of COVID. And so that 800 number does have a decent range between some of the years. I think the most we had in one year was about 1,400, and some of the others were a little bit below 600. That said, this is a 2050 plan. We've only been accruing data on this for about 5 years, and then on top of that, most of that, as we discussed in the development pipeline, was already in the pipeline before Redmond 2050 went live. The good news is that since the new Redmond 2050 regulations have occurred and gone into effect, we've had plenty. We have 4-digit housing units coming in Overlake alone. So the immediate future looks good. To your point about how developers may focus on, let's say, the low-hanging fruit first, that is true. And that's one of the reasons why the development capacity we did gave a little bit of a buffer. The hope is that we've provided enough overage on our development capacity that the market will continue to find different components and areas that have sufficient financial feasibility to invest capital, develop housing, and get the return. Now, importantly, as you noted, there's a lot of factors outside of our control, right? If lending rates go haywire, if construction costs suddenly spike, we will see year-to-year noise. But overall, we can keep monitoring, evaluating, and as needed, iterating our policies to ensure we continue meeting our housing goal.
Wonderful, thank you. That answered my question. Do we have any other questions from council? Wonderful, well, thank you all so much for the presentation. That was amazing.
Thank you.
That is the end of our informational section. And next up, our final item is one item from other committee. The correction of 2 classifications within the 2026 fire support pay plan presented by Director Laird.
Good evening. Thank you, Council. Yes, so I'm here to share with you a Scrivener's error that occurred within the fire support pay plan, and I'm seeking your approval to keep this item on tonight's council consent during the business meeting. So the city and the fire support union negotiated the fire support successor collective bargaining agreement. On October 22nd, 2025, both parties came to a tentative agreement on the CBA, and on November 11th, during the executive session, I shared with you the parameters of the new CBA. Following the executive session, the union voted to approve their new CBA, and then the final approval was obtained through you through the consent agenda on December 2nd. Your approval of the successor CBA included the Fire Support 2026 pay plan, which listed the pay ranges for each classification. Unfortunately, the pay plan that you approved was later discovered to be incorrect. The problem was caught by HR staff when they were applying the approved COLAs to individual employees. 2 classifications were affected, the fire mechanic grade FS30 and the fire apparatus program supervisor grade FS40. The error occurred when staff accidentally applied the market analysis percentage incorrectly that resulted in a decrease to the 2026 pay range for these 2 classifications. Through negotiations, this was never the intent that these 2 pay ranges would decrease. We are calling this a Scrivener's error because it was an unintentional switch in how the market percentage was applied to the fire support pay plan. There is no budget impact with the correction, as it was always the intent to not decrease the pay ranges for these classifications. The correct pay ranges were accounted for within the 2025-26 budget. So again, I'm seeking your approval to keep this item on council consent tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Laird. Do we have any questions? I see Council Member Kritzer.
Thank you. I don't have any issues with addressing the Scrivener's error to make sure, especially that these employees get adequately compensated. I'm just curious on the process in terms of learning so that we don't have another error like this occur again. Can you share with us any process that'll be gone through in the future? And also, did we go through on all of the updates to make sure that no other errors like this were made?
Yes, we did look at all of the other pay plans. So I will be honest, we have some new staff, and they just didn't know how to apply it. So we talked through what happened, and then we made sure that they understand how to apply it in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Are there any objections to this item going on the consent agenda for tonight's meeting on January 20th? Wonderful.
Thank you.
Well then, we have now reached the end of today's agenda. Is there anything else for the good of the order? If not, then we are adjourned.